Well, I knew we had to. I knew the strange streak had to end sooner or later. Not that this episode was bad, far from it. In fact, this show really seems to be hitting its stride at this point. However, this episode failed to reach the dramatic heights of the previous two. And I think a lot of that can point to one particular aspect that this episode had that the other two episodes did not necessarily have, but I'll get to that in a minute. Really, the plot of this episode isn't really. It's definitely not as self-contained as the previous one, where they were trapped in the gas station. Instead, it's more of, picking up the pieces, coping with past events, kind of learning a bit more about what's going on, blah blah blah. And first off, I just like to say the flashbacks to Poland, the concentration camp in Poland. I actually thought that would be a one-off thing. Stupid me. This is coming from the same guy who thought that the island flashbacks on Arrow would be a one-off thing. But it turns out, for the time being anyway, they're going to be a regular part of the episode. And now that they're actually out of the concentration camp, Satrakian and the others are out of the concentration camp. It can it can proceed in a very interesting way, I think. Now, in addition, this episode finally saw the reveal of the Master, and I am so glad that the Master has been realized through practical effects. Really, that was the biggest thing I was worried about is was this going to be an all CGI creation? Not only would it feel at that point, not only would it feel like every other CGI creation these days, albeit potentially a great one, considering we have really great CGI characters in this generation. But practical effects, I don't really know how CGI would handle in creating an entire character given the television format. It's different if you have millions and millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars to create these characters like Gollum and Caesar and Smaug on the big screen. On the small screen, you're a little bit more limited. And given this show's fairly sparse use of CGI up to this point, I think it would be a little bit too jarring to have an entirely CGI character. So the Master, as far as I can tell, was realized mostly through practical effects. He honestly looks a lot like Nosferatu, which, knowing knowing the species of the monsters on this show, I'm guessing that was probably not too much of a mistake or too much of a coincidence. But the big problem with this episode is the son, F's son, not the best actor. I mean, he handles the crying scenes okay, but really, when I am taken out of the moment by for any reason, I tend to rate an episode or a particular movie a little bit lower on the scale, as it were. And to me, this kid's lack of emotion a lot of the time, or lack of emotional intensity, really took me out of some of the scenes. For instance, when he's being attacked by the uh, the vampire version of his mom's boyfriend, he's like, "Get away from me!" Eh. And I'm like, "Could you show some emotion, please?" And that's not the only instance in the episode where I'm thinking, this kid. There's a reason he wasn't involved in many of the horrific scenes up to this point, because again, he's not exactly the best actor. I get the feeling that he wouldn't do too poorly if he was in something like a sitcom, but really, you really have to push for something like this, for a horror movie, of course. You really have to have someone who can really push these emotional heights beyond their age. I think of Carrie Henn from Aliens, or I think of Edward Furlong from Terminator 2. Guys like that who could really act beyond their years. In fact, I'm a little distressed to not really to find either of them in the mainstream today, for whatever reason. But Yeah, that was really the only huge detriment to this episode was the kid. He wasn't annoying or anything, he just was not very good. And that is a shame. But aside from him, all the rest of the acting was pretty good. Corey Stoll is still very good. Mia Maestro is still does a very good job with the supportive friends slash potential love interest. I've liked how their relationship has progressed over this time. You know, it's not necessarily shoved in your face, but when they finally do sleep together in this episode, I actually thought it was somewhat earned given all they've been through. I didn't really feel like it was exploitative. I didn't really feel like it was pointless to me, and I'm not using this as a comparison of the quality of the overall show. But to me, it was kind of like when Sarah Connor slept with Kyle Reese in the first Terminator movie. How once you're in this very stressful situation, sometimes you need to. I don't want to use the word unwind, but sometimes characters feel the need to be intimate with someone and preferably someone familiar. So whenever a character feels the need to do that in this type of scenario, if it's done right, I don't necessarily mind. In fact, I actually think it strengthens their relationship, and I actually think that is what this moment leaned towards. On a side note, we have Kevin Durand still gung ho about killing vampires, not to the point where it becomes annoying per se, but you can definitely tell that he's actually far more willing to believe Satraki and learn from him and do what needs to be done. He's actually far more willing to do this than the CDC guys, F and Nora. And seeing him interact with the British chick, I forget her name, the one who disabled the internet and whatnot. Seeing those three interact, Satrakian, Kevin Durand, and the British chick, the blonde British chick. I actually I actually like the somewhat cynical nature of their characters more. Or maybe cynical is not the right word. Maybe taking initiative under pressure more easily than someone like one of these CDC characters who are constantly trying to find this alternative. And I don't really think any conversation really captured that more than when they were arguing about the death of Jim Kent, Sean Astin's character from the previous episode. So yeah, overall, I didn't really think there was anything wrong with this episode apart from F's son. I actually thought it was a nice way to sort of wind down before the big finale series of episodes. Like I said, the effects, I like the type of effect they're going with the master. I like the way this show is building. Like I said, I think this show is really starting to gain its stride. So this way, even when they have a dull episode, it's only dull by the standard that they are setting, the very suspenseful, on the run type of setting that they're going for. So having a quote unquote dull episode, I actually think dull carries a little bit too much of a negative connotation. But when they have a dull episode, I actually think it provides a good chance for the characters to unwind and for us as audience members to further digest what's going on. So yeah, I like this episode for the most part. Again, not quite as strong as the previous two, but yeah, I suppose it still accomplished what it set out to do, which was make me look forward to the last one, or the next one. Sorry, and yeah, we finally saw the master.